For most of Japan's history, there were two rulers. One sat on a golden throne in an ancient capital, was worshipped as a living descendant of the sun goddess, and was called the sacred sovereign of all Japan. The other lived behind the walls of a fortress, commanded every warrior in the land, collected the taxes, made the laws, and decided who lived and who died. Here is the strange part. The one everyone bowed to as the divine ruler, the emperor, had almost no power at all. And the one who actually ruled, the shogun, knelt, at least in theory, before him. For nearly 700 years, Japan was governed by this beautiful, deliberate illusion, a sacred figurehead who reigned and a military strongman who ruled. This is how it actually worked. Start with the emperor. In Japanese, the Tenno, the heavenly sovereign. His authority did not come from armies or wealth, it came from the gods. By tradition, the imperial line descends in an unbroken chain from Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun herself, making the emperor not merely a king, but a high priest, the living bridge between heaven and the Japanese people. This is why the throne is called the oldest continuous hereditary monarchy on Earth. By legend, it stretches back over 2,500 years to the first emperor, Jimmu. The emperor's regalia are not a crown, an orb, but three sacred objects said to be handed down from the gods, a mirror, a sword, and a jewel. And his central duty was never really to govern. It was to be, to perform the ancient Shinto rituals that kept the harvest good and the cosmos in balance, to embody the unbroken thread of the nation, and, crucially, to be the ultimate source of legitimacy. In Japan, no one could rule with full authority unless the emperor said they could. That single power, the power to legitimize, would turn out to be everything. Because here is the twist that defines Japanese history. For roughly 1,000 years, the emperor reigned, but did not rule. The sacred sovereign, it turned out, was a sacred prisoner, too holy to be removed, too holy to actually be obeyed. Real power was always exercised in his name, by somebody else. First, it was the great aristocratic families, above all, the Fujiwara, who for centuries married their daughters to emperors and then governed as regents for the child emperors they had installed. Then came an even stranger arrangement, where emperors would abdicate the throne, hand it to a young heir, and then rule from behind the scenes as cloistered emperors, free of the throne's suffocating rituals. The pattern was set early and never broke. The closer you sat to the sacred center, the less actual power you held. The emperor became the still point at the heart of a machine that everyone else was fighting to control. And then, in the 12th century, a new kind of man seized that machine. Not a courtier, but a warrior. For centuries, the imperial court in Kyoto had looked down on the provincial warriors, the bushi, the samurai, as rough, expendable muscle. That was a mistake. As the court grew soft and its politics grew poisonous, real power drained out to the men with the swords. In 1185, after a brutal civil war, one warrior lord stood above all the rest, Minamoto no Yoritomo. But Yoritomo did something clever. He did not overthrow the emperor. He did not seize the throne. Instead, he had the emperor grant him an old military title, Sei Tai Shogun, the great general who subdues the barbarians. Shogun for short. And he set up his own government, the bakufu, literally the tent government, the administration of a general in the field, far from the imperial capital, in the eastern town of Kamakura. On paper, the shogun was merely the emperor's top military servant, ruling on his behalf. In reality, the shogun now ran the country. the emperor reigned in Kyoto. The shogun governed from Kamakura. And for the next 7 centuries, that split, sacred throne, military government, was the true constitution of Japan. So what did the shogun actually do? Everything a real government does. He was the supreme commander of the entire warrior class, and through them, the master of the land. Beneath him stood the daimyo, the great feudal lords, each ruling his own domain with his own army of samurai, and each bound in loyalty to the shogun. The shogun's bakufu collected the taxes, almost always paid in rice, the true currency of old Japan. It made and enforced the laws, settled disputes, punished rebels, defended the realm, and managed relations with the outside world. If there was order in Japan, the shogun kept it. If there was war, the shogun waged it. The emperor, meanwhile, went on with his sacred calendar of rituals in Kyoto, often in genuine poverty, sometimes so short of money that coronations had to be delayed for years. Reverence flowed to the emperor. Rice, soldiers, and obedience flowed to the shogun. It was one of the most complete separations of prestige from power the world has ever seen. But it was about to get even stranger. Because the shogun, the man with all the real power, was often a puppet too. Look closely at that first shogunate in Kamakura. Within a couple of generations, the Minamoto shoguns had become figureheads, and the true rulers were a family called the Hojo, who governed as the shogun's regents, the shikin. Sit with that for a moment. You had an emperor, worshipped as a god, controlled by a shogun, who was himself controlled by a regent, who in some periods was controlled by his own retired predecessor. Power behind power behind power, a hall of mirrors in which almost no one who looked like the ruler actually was the ruler. It is one of the most distinctive features of Japanese politics. Authority was almost never held openly by the person at the top. It was exercised quietly, from one step back, by whoever truly controlled the person who controlled the figurehead. The face of power and the fact of power were almost never the same. This whole system reached its towering peak with the third and last shogunate, the Tokugawa. In the year 1603, after a century of ferocious civil war, one man finally clamped the entire country in his fist, Tokugawa Ieyasu. He took the title of shogun and built his capital in a fishing town called Edo, the city we now call Tokyo. What the Tokugawa built was extraordinary. 2.5 centuries of near total peace, an achievement almost unmatched in world history. They controlled the daimyo with an ingenious rule called sankin-kotai, alternate attendance, forcing every lord to spend every other year in Edo and to leave his own family there permanently as hostages when he went home. They froze society into rigid classes with the samurai on top, and they sealed the entire country off from the outside world for over 200 years, a policy of isolation so strict that leaving Japan could be punished by death. Through all of it, the emperor remained in Kyoto, honored, funded on a tight allowance, surrounded by ritual, and utterly powerless. The Tokugawa even wrote formal laws telling the emperor how to spend his time, on scholarship and ceremony, and pointedly, not on politics. Then, in 1853, the outside world came knocking, with cannons. A fleet of American warships, the Black Ships, steamed into a Japanese bay and demanded that the country open to trade. The shogun, faced with technology his samurai swords could not answer, was forced to sign humiliating treaties, and the whole 250-year-old system began to crack. Rebellious samurai found a devastating rallying cry, and it was not their own advancement. It was the emperor. Revere the emperor. Expel the barbarians, they chanted. For the first time in centuries, that quiet, sacred figurehead in Kyoto became the banner of a revolution. In 1868, the last shogun surrendered his power. The 700-year age of the warriors ended, and the throne was, in name, restored. It is called the Meiji Restoration, the return of the emperor. Except the young Emperor Meiji did not truly seize personal power either. A circle of brilliant reformers now ruled in his name, using his sacred authority as the engine to blast Japan out of the feudal age and into a modern industrial empire in a single generation. The figurehead had simply been handed to new masters. But this time, the figurehead was made stronger and far more dangerous than ever before. The modernizers rebuilt the emperor not as a quiet priest, but as the divine head of a nation-state, a living god, the sacred commander of a powerful military, at the center of an official state religion. It was in his name that Japan modernized, and in his name that Japan marched into the catastrophe of the Second World War. When that war ended in ruin in 1945, the world expected the Emperor Hirohito to be swept away. Instead, something unprecedented happened. In 1946, the Emperor went on the radio and did the one thing no emperor had ever done. He publicly renounced his own divinity, declaring himself a human being, not a living god. And a new constitution, written in the shadow of defeat, redefined the throne one last time, stripping away every shred of political power and every claim to godhood, and leaving behind only the very oldest thing the emperor had ever been, a symbol. And that is exactly what the emperor is today. The current constitution opens by defining him in its very first article as the symbol of the state and of the unity of the people, and explicitly gives him no powers of government at all. Emperor Naruhito, who took the throne in 2019, reigns over the world's oldest monarchy, yet cannot pass a law, command a soldier, or so much as express a political opinion. He performs ceremonies, receives ambassadors, and embodies the nation, precisely the role his ancestors held 1,000 years ago, before the shoguns ever rose. There is no shogun anymore. Real power now sits with an elected government. But look at the deep pattern, and you realize Japan never truly abandoned its ancient invention. It simply perfected it. The sacred symbol who reigns but does not rule, and the real power exercised quietly by others in his name. That was the arrangement for most of 2,000 years. A throne that survived longer than any other on earth, precisely because it learned to hold everything by holding nothing.